Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coast, Be the Media. Real women, real opinions from sea to shining sea. And tonight I have with me Miss Mary.
Hello.
Miss Kathy.
Hello, everybody.
And Miss Emma from all the way down in Texas.
Hey, from Texas.
And Finley's going to join us tonight, apparently, also. So, anyways, tonight we wanted to discuss the Epstein arrest. Jeffrey Epstein was arrested, as most know, last week. He had almost gotten away with his horrible crimes. Mary, you want to give us some background on what happened with Miami and how this kind of got done with Acosta, just real quick, just to give that quick background?
Well, we all know that Epstein was doing dirty deeds to children and bringing them to his various homes, and most especially he had a home in the Miami area where they were bringing in young girls to do massages on him. He was paying them. The rule was the more they did, the more they made. And they were the younger, the better. There was one girl that was brought in who was 23, and he said, no, she's too old. And he was arrested, and he was released because, from what I understand, most of the girls, none of the girls were coming forward. They couldn't get enough people to testify. But now they've got him in New York. So, because
wasn't it the state of Florida? They were pressured to drop the charges. So
right in our favorite location, Palm Beach,
and then Palm Beach.
Right, well, Palm Beach, exactly.
And that's when the feds, when back then it was Alex Acosta, who just stepped down. He stepped in and was able to get what he was able to get, and without him getting that, they would not be able to reopen this in New York.
Literally, hundreds of girls brought through there, and there were girls who he respected. If they said they'll only go so far, they'll only massage him, they'll only take their clothes off, they'll only do this. But many of the girls said that they were raped. And he would apologize for raping them, but it's kind of like the damage was done. But literally hundreds of girls brought through there. And then when he got tired of some of the girls, he would hire them to bring other girls in.
Correct.
It's kind of like the Nexium pyramid scheme.
That's right.
One girl brings in 8 girls, and so on and so on. He was getting massages 2, 3, 4 girls a night.
Well, didn't we confirm that Mueller was with the FBI, part on the wing of the investigation during that period?
Yes.
Yummy.
Well, Jeffrey Epstein, and we're learning more and more about him today with his bail hearing. Apparently, he had a passport with the home origin of Saudi Arabia that had his face on it, but it wasn't his name.
Fake name.
Very typical. I bet you if they start getting into the other properties, including Epstein Island, which back in January there was a big explosion and a fire at the island. It's interesting that the temple, I think a lot of people aren't realizing that the temple, what do you do at temples, right? But the temple that has that big gold dome on it and has the weird writing, the writing is the same writing that they find at some of the mosques in Aleppo. And if you go and Google mosques in Aleppo and compare them to the temple on
like that eyeball thing,
the same makeup. It looks just like if you were looking for a high ranch, you know what a high ranch looks like. It looks like the mosques in Aleppo. So Acosta got the charges. Everybody gets upset with Acosta. So Acosta stepped down. And now this week we're having the bail hearing. So we're learning a lot about how much money he has. And that's when we all started saying, we need to follow the money.
Right.
Yeah, because nobody was able to answer the question, how did he get, he's a billionaire. But nobody knows where he got his money from. Well, we know, but nobody really knows.
Yeah, the real train of where the money went or how he got it drops off all of a sudden. Like he's working for this firm, then he went on his own, he had hedge funding, and he was doing things, and then nobody knows. It just stopped.
Well, sounds like he was working in cash.
Right. Blackmail. I mean, well, I think a lot of it we're going to start finding when they start going through the financials, which is what we're actually going to get into, is the Jeffrey Foundation 1-5. So it's 4. Jeffrey Foundation IV. Oh, weird. I just made the connection with IV. Ooh. Oh, now I know why. They hide it in plain sight. So his foundation was called the Jeffrey Epstein 4 or IV Foundation. And we had learned over the last 24 to 48 hours of all the political contributions that he has made and to whom. Emma, you want to throw some of that out there?
Well, we understand that Kamala Harris took some moolah.
Oh, yeah.
And nobody has said whether or not she's going to keep it or whatever. And we know that Schumer came on and said, well, he gave me money too, and I'm going to donate it to some sort of a charity. So that's may or may not be true. So what was very interesting is people like, I'm trying to think some of the people who he went to dinner with. Of course, we've got the Clinton Foundation. That's going to be huge.
Right.
And we've got, what was it up to now? 27 trips of little Billy who went on.
26, yeah.
Feeling all of those soon from the first case. So we're actually going to be able to see the flight logs
Correct.
From the first case that were sealed and have been sealed for, what has it been, 15 years now?
Plus, we're looking at a different form of transportation, which was a secondary airplane system called Wings Up.
Yes.
Which was right in the footprint of the power outage that went down in New York. And as I mentioned to you this morning, chatting, there were 2 more power outages overnight. One was in Los Angeles, and I think it was in the Los Angeles area, and the other one was in Washington, D.C.
Right.
That's interesting.
So we're waiting to hear, what they're gonna suggest was the cause of those.
So when we get
manhole fire.
A manhole fire. Well, I took a snapshot of that because what was it? Was it de Blasio or was it Como? He tweeted it was a manhole fire.
Right.
And I was like, I said, well, let me get a copy of that because no one's going to believe me.
This is crazy.
I don't know how he knew what it was. He was nowhere near here. He was out campaigning.
Right.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that supposed temple. What you're going to find, and some of the people who've been examining the pictures and some of the drones that are going over and taking some close-ups.
Yes, there's a man out there with 4 series of 4K drone footage that's quite interesting, and he shows all the tunnels and entrances. And
well, one of the things about the picture of the temple itself, it says that one side where it looks like there's a wooden type door, that is actually painted on. There really isn't a door there.
Oh, cool.
Right.
And I can get you those pictures. And then what they were indicating is, doesn't that look more like an elevator?
Yeah, it's an elevator shaft that's rumored to go down 17 floors.
And then you've got the dome, which would have been the equipment area.
Right. And the dome is gone because they had a hurricane that went through back in, I forget when, but that's why the dome is no longer there if anybody's using Google Earth now.
There was somebody took a picture. I haven't been able to verify the picture itself yet, that indicated that they thought there was an ambulance pulled up to that area this morning. And they were wondering, they're all going crazy about anything. We have to be very careful. What I was explaining to y'all, there's this program out there called TINEYE, TINEYE.com. And for anyone who's out there that wants to start looking at photographs to see, when they say, oh, this photo was just taken today or last week or something, you can upload for free the video, the picture that you have, upload it, and it'll tell you all the iterations of it on the internet and the dates of the first posting.
Oh, Mary, your fan.
Pardon?
Is it your fan or?
Yeah, it's my fan again.
Yeah, sounds like a train.
I know, I can't do anything about it. I'm sorry.
Just like the Trump train, we can't just do anything about it.
You just can't stop the Trump train.
So they are, and the media is desperately trying to connect the president and Epstein, but the rest of everyone is all saying that they're running like hell, trying to say that they don't know him.
Oh, yeah.
It was only a casual dinner.
Right.
So people were also concerned that the indictment was just so vanilla. And I think people need to understand that there's superseding indictments that will be added on.
Yes.
And they alluded to it even when they started naming employee 1, employee 2, and employee 3. I believe employee 1 is going to be Ghislaine Maxwell, and she has her own foundation. It's like everybody has their own foundation.
We all have foundations.
That's
And I
right.
think that that's how they trade the blackmail money.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Well, they also alluded to the fact that we don't mention his name, but we have to in case people don't know that John McCain Foundation had taken some money,
Absolutely.
and that was one of the reasons that the Arizona border, it was so intensely important that they kept the Arizona border open. Because they, as we knew from Nexium, they had child care centers and they had trafficking coming up from Mexico up to and including the former Mexican president's son.
Right.
Yes.
So that whole stream of people who were absconding with young folks and trafficking them is another reason why we need to shut down the border and really get an orderly transfer of legitimate people through the ports of entry.
And we are going to be wrapping up the series that we did on Nixium. They still haven't, they're still awaiting sentencing. I know that he was found guilty. He has not been sentenced yet. But we want to make sure that we get on the record the information that we found out.
When did they say that he was going to get sentenced?
I believe he is, what's her name? Allison Mack is September 11th.
Right.
So these are all going to be, I remember that because, I mean, how do you not remember
Yeah,
that?
how do you not remember the date? Exactly.
Right. So he'll be coming up and we'll make sure that we get all that out so that it's there, because a lot of it really does tie into the Jeffrey Epstein case. It's interesting how they do take the monies into the foundations. And then in the case of Nixium, because there's so many rules and regulations in the United States on how you can, find cures for diseases. Like you can't just, tie your dog up and start putting stuff in her. You can't do that. So they take it to places where they can and they hide it in that way. So we know that Claire Brofman had a background. This is in regards to Nixium. And honest to goodness, they really do. They're totally related. That's why we're going to bounce back and forth with them.
Well, we were told to check some of the places where finances and those kinds of things are sheltered. And it looks like that whole Virgin Island, those whole stream of islands that come off down through the Caribbean islands, all the way up through and just in close proximity to Haiti. And then they were talking about there's an awful lot of missing children from Haiti.
Yes, there are. Orphanages are empty.
And then we were told to look for the fact that there are 2 swamps on Epstein Island.
Oh boy.
And
oh God.
They're looking at maybe doing some core samples and maybe doing some digging on there for that might have been used for the disposal of bodies. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Well, so that's what they would do. They would take after they abuse the body in either way, either sexually or through the experiments they were conducting. They had the mind control ones, the snuff films that they were showing to see how they would react. So after they would take every bit they could and the person was now dead, then they harvest the organs and get rid of what's left of the money, which is interesting because this week President Trump passed an executive order for us to help come up with new androidish-like ways for livers mostly. I did not know that.
I thought it was kidneys.
Maybe it's kidneys. I could be right. You could be right. We'll go back and fix that. But either way, I couldn't believe one organ in that, either the liver or the kidney, $262,000 on the black market.
Right, because you get 2 kidneys, so you can ultimately transfer 1 kidney per patient.
Right.
It's crazy to me. So anyway, so on the Nixium side, Claire Brofman was conducting these experiments. It's all on the record. They were doing these mind control things. They had the preschools set up. The preschools were set up in a way where they would bring the child in and it'd be a different teacher speaking a different language every day, and totally screwed the kids up for $50,000 a year. So when we started following the money on Jeffrey Epstein and his foundation, we found that it led to a lot of math. Well, first of all, he was a math and science teacher back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Right. Yeah, he worked at the Dalton School, which is a private prep school kind of a thing. And he wasn't an accredited teacher. He just had courses and he was good at.
Oh,
Yeah, somebody in error was trying to claim that our AG Barr's father was working there at that time, and it was cleared up that no, AG Barr's father was not even there at the same time.
okay.
Yeah, so that was cleared up, I think, this morning.
Was he was there at some point?
Apparently, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but it wasn't, yeah, but one was like in the first quarter of the year and was gone before I think Barr's father came in like on the third or fourth quarter of that year. So
Okay.
there wasn't even an overlap of being there at the same time.
Okay.
Well, some of the traceable money at this time has showed that he has spent, it's 30 billion he has given to certain universities for their science experiments, and it
Right.
mostly revolved around education or mind control. Right. And that's what we were looking into. And that's why we really brought Kathy in, because she wants to tell us how this relates to Common Core and STEM technology.
Oh, it's so much fun.
But Kathy, isn't Common Core over now for New York? Hasn't that been removed?
Okay. The word Common Core is gone, but the branding of it, it's the same curriculum that's being followed because the same tests are going to be used. The federally mandated tests, they tell you can pick whatever tests you want to give as long as they're rigorous and they touch all the bases. But there's only two companies that do that, and they're both related, and it's both Pearson.
And they
So
all lead back to Jeffrey Epstein. All the funding.
I didn't see.
But I thought Nancy DeVos was going to end the.
She ended the mandate that you had to use Pearson testing. But she continued the mandate that you have to do your own testing, and they highly recommend that you use these two companies. One is called Engage something, or no, that's the curriculum. That's the curriculum. But there's two companies that they can use, and they're both the same company.
Didn't she eliminate the mandate though that states have to subscribe to Common Core in order to get funding?
Yeah, she said you don't have to use it, but they highly recommend that you have your own standards. And most of the states said, well, we have these standards here and we have the curriculum that goes with it. So we're just going to call it like New York is calling them the Empire Standards, or they were going to call them, Excelsior or whatever.
Right.
They just keep changing the name, but the actual implementation of it is exactly the same. What concerned me, going way back to when Common Core went in, is that they were taking the literature, which all of our kids went through literature. We learned literature. Literature is the vehicle that gives children their culture and their values. And our culture and our values are handed down. So you have conversations with them about a book and you say, why did they make this decision? Was this a good decision? And you can talk about character formation and problem solving and all of those things. Well, that was all eliminated when Common Core came in because they limited literature to only a paragraph here, a paragraph there. They would have excerpts from books, and 50 to 70% of all of the things that are being presented to the children are nonfiction. Nonfiction means you're reading a scientific article, you're going to read a manual on how you do something. It's all technical journal kinds of things. They explained it that they were going to get rid of the female emphasis and give boys a better chance at passing English. That's not how it works, but that's what they were thinking. And then the focus on math and science, or the STEM, there's a big emphasis now. Jen, I'm sure you know, your girls come home from school and say, oh, you have to do STEM and you're going to do computer programming and everybody's going to make robots and da-da-da-da-da. And they're doing all of these things. Why do they do that? because the math and the science, again, remove girls from the English language arts where they excel.
Where they excel. And it's all, I mean, when Common Core came in, it took math and turned it upside down.
Now,
And
there's a really good reason for that.
it made it impossible for us as parents to be able to teach our children math.
That's right. But here's as I was going through this and going through the Nexium stuff and whatever. Okay, the math, the way that math is taught and the way that science is taught now is there are no foundational facts or truths. Everything is explored and found out by cooperative learning. So when you do the math problem and you have 17 steps to get to the end and you all come up, did you get 9? No, I got 12. Oh, but how did you do it? I did da 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 da. You get the points. I get the points because we all did the process right. It doesn't matter. We got the actual equations correct, because that's not the point of it. The point is to have no foundational facts to build upon. And in the Nexium mind controls things, they were focusing on something called uncertainty. And uncertainty is, it's why they had the kids speak in all the different languages. One day everybody would be speaking Spanish, and the next day everybody's speaking in French, and the next day, why? Because you never learn to trust an adult.
Right.
You never need to trust your learning. You never learn to stand on, I know how this is going to be today because this is the person who's, now she can change in a breath and be a different language tomorrow. So
keep the kids in a constant state of hypervigilance.
You can also look around and see how that's already taken place, because we have a whole generation of victimhood now. It's learned.
Absolutely. And that's all by design. All of this is by design. So if the kids never have anything to stand on, there's no facts, there's no foundational information, they're always rediscovering and reinventing and being the discoverer of the next topic. So when they talk about gravity, for example, they just throw the kids into the experiment and then say, what did you learn? Rather than, we all believe that this is what gravity is, and Isaac Newton, and you give them the history, and he had the apple fell on the head. Why did it fall down? Why didn't it fall up? Let's do experiments to explore that. No. So they never learn the underlying principle. They have to explore it on themselves. And if they never get there, that's okay. It's just fine, because they're doing the best they can and they're collaborating with each other.
So you're saying they never build on concepts, that everything always starts from scratch every time.
Every time.
So they never evolve.
Correct.
Well, and so the consequence of this is, during normal adolescent development, or child and adolescent development, the part of the brain that is supposed to develop over the course of adolescence into adulthood is the prefrontal cortex. And if they are taught the ordinary way, which is steps, where you master one thing and build on it, right? They call it scaffolding. That is the center of all critical thinking. The prefrontal cortex is the center of all critical thinking. But what they do by doing this is they keep the kids in a constant state of uncertainty and anxiety. And instead of the prefrontal cortex developing, a system in the brain called the limbic system overdevelops. And the limbic system is the anger center. It's the raw emotion center. And when that overdevelops, that's where you get anxiety, violence, inability to deal with any adversity, and they're on a constant state of rage.
Yep.
Absolutely. So they never learn how to cope.
Yeah. Correct.
Right. Now we have social emotional learning that's coming in. That was the last piece of this that's coming in. And what that's going to do is teach them how to self-regulate, how to do all of these normal things that come with development, but we haven't taught them anything along the way. So nothing is based on right and wrong anymore, though. So since it's not based on right and wrong, how do you teach children to do this?
Well, it have to be robots.
Exactly.
It's all
You
They're
have
about
making the robots.
pattern.
They're making
Follow the pattern. You must follow the pattern. And they're teaching them meditation skills, deep
Yes.
breathing. But
Kathy,
again,
is your school a Covey school? All that Covey crap?
oh, I've been through him.
Oh
years
my
and years
God, the
ago.
Covey crap is everywhere. They
Which
walk
Covey?
into
Wait, wait,
Covey
wait.
wrote
Stephen Covey.
the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Right.
You
Yeah.
walk into these schools and they have these quotes splattered all over the walls, and you have the principals speaking to the teachers in Covey. And it's not
Yeah.
like, hey, have a nice day. It's like, be the best person you can be today.
Yeah.
And be
And you know, that is quite a distortion because you had Franklin Covey for years, and that was
Right.
it's been a huge transition and manipulation of that whole principle.
Right. Now, the other thing that I found really interesting was the mind behavior center in Harvard. They follow. We all learned when we were going to school that there's Maslow's theory, the hierarchy of needs. So you have your basic physical needs, and then you go to the emotional, and you end up at the top. And at the top, you are self-actualized. You are a solid person who's able to take care of themselves and take care of the world around them. This one is based on that the top of the pyramid is competence. So all you're looking is to get people to be competent.
So just mediocre. So just
Yeah.
mediocre.
Well, you start with existence, then you go to species, saving your species, affiliation, certainty, and competence. But competence. So it's not about interacting with other people. It's just being in your own head. I did this right. Okay, good for me. You know, it's very self-centered. It's all self. So we have all these snowflakes around. Why? Because they've been told, oh, if you don't feel good, everybody else's problem. You know, they all have to take care of you because you can't take care of yourself.
And I don't think people realize how by design this is, because once Jeffrey Epstein got enough of his billions of dollars, that he started his foundation. He's been helping develop these educational programs based upon for a very long time, to the point now we're where we're at, but we're about a generation out already.
That's
from
right.
those kids being educated, and we're starting to see the products of that.
That's right.
And I don't think people realize that this whole me generation, this whole entitlement generation is based upon a learned behavior that was created by this man who I don't think people realize that. And yes, his money was going to the Harvard Mind Studies.
Yes, it was.
And people haven't really researched this part. That's why I said once they open up the foundations, that's where the key is. Who else's money was going to conduct these experiments underneath the radar of regulation in the United States that's designed to prevent this from happening?
Right.
So when you were saying that it began at a certain generation, can you give me like a 10-year decade, like 1980s?
Well, he was born in 1947. He was 27 years old when he first started with whatever the hell he was doing in Saudi Arabia. And there's some really interesting connections to Khashoggi, believe it or not. I don't know if you guys, I did a really deep dive. This is going to be an ongoing issue, I think, as we start to see the information come out. Next week, we're going to get 20,000 pages of unsealed documents from the first case. So we'll have some more tangible information at that time. Right now, all I have is being able to place who was where when this happened. And there's some really good, Technofog is a really good one on Twitter. He's been on it. And I want to go ahead and recommend Amazing Polly. Amazing Polly did a great video where she put this all together, especially in relationship. This one's called Mad Scientists.
Yeah.
It's on her YouTube channel. So just go look up Amazing Polly, go to Mad Scientists. We've all been talking about it privately, it's just one of those things where the mainstream media is just, they're not covering certain things that are very important to Americans. Education is key, but I think they don't want us to know that they've been brainwashing our children. But Emma, to answer your question, I want to say that probably the 25 to 26-year-olds right now were the first part of the beginning of the re-education slowly series of where they are. They really ramped it up in my kids' generation when they flipped the math with the Common Core.
Right.
And unfortunately, that took a lot of parents out
Okay,
of
so,
the living.
so that would have, so that you can better identify, that would have been mid 1990s.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
That's about right after I graduated.
And that would actually be around the time they did start with social and emotional learning. I mean, that's really the beginnings of it.
Right.
Well, we know Epstein was getting into his social circles in 1992 when he had that Victoria's Secret tryout private thing at Mar-a-Lago with Trump. That was in 1992. He bought Epstein Island in 2002. So this was an evolution of him. And as he started to get into those circles, and I think it was intentional at this point, him and Ghislaine Maxwell, who she has been photographed at the wedding of Chelsea Clinton.
Yes, she was.
Yes, she was.
Yeah.
Yes, she was.
And I mean, this is all factual information that anybody can find easily.
So yeah, they're actually giving Epstein a lot more media attention than they gave NXIVM.
Well, because they think they can connect it to Trump because he was a member of
Mar-a-Lago. Well, of course.
Right.
So,
That's
Kathy and Mary, how are we going to undo this?
Oh gosh.
I mean, you guys are the 50-pound heads when it comes to this.
Yeah, this is it's brainwashing. I mean, it's literally brainwashing.
It's an entire generation. And they started it, I mean, if you go back educationally, in schools, they started the quote unquote new math that started some of these wonderful processes. That started in the 90s. And then also in the 90s, what they stopped doing was teaching history, and they started doing global
world studies.
Right. And you had to be a global citizen. And you had to,
What did you call that? What did you call it again?
It was
global studies.
Global studies. But they focused on themes rather than on actual events in history. So they would say, let's talk about how people move from one continent to another. And they would talk about migration. They would talk about needs and weather and blah, blah, blah. But it was all done thematically rather than factually again. You know,
that's all ushered in under the No Child Left Behind, which was
correct.
Yes,
that's correct.
And that's just to go back to your question. If you did a brain scan of this generation from like 0 to say 35, their brains would look nothing like our brains.
Right.
Because they've overdeveloped parts of the brain and underdeveloped other parts of the brain.
Right.
So how to undo that? You'd have to do a brain transplant.
Yeah, or just a lot of reprogramming. But using smartphones significantly contributes to this, because all of these, I mean, for them to say every child is going to have, you know, they're using smart boards and things pop in and pop out, and it's all fast. And a lot of schools are saying this is really harming the kids, and they really need to go back to reading books rather than everything tablets.
So a person who's been through this and has been successfully manipulated, what kind of jobs are they able to take in a role of society?
Well, all the decisions are going to be made by the computers.
Right.
So they're just going to have to be the pawns to move things around and carry the boxes and fill up the Amazons, and it's going to be manual labor.
Except the children of the elites.
That's right.
That's going to be a whole, they're going to be in a whole different realm.
Yep.
They have a whole different kind of education, a whole different type of brain development, and they're being groomed to be the leaders and the world leaders and the rich people.
Yep.
And yeah, everybody else is being groomed to work in a cubicle at IBM.
Right.
Now, another person who has
Brave New World.
foundation, who owned part of the bail agreement that he's trying to get is he wants to give $44 million and stay in his 26,000 square foot mansion that's in one of the most biggest pieces of real estate in New York City. This would be Jeffrey Epstein, because we're at his bail hearing right now. He owns this piece of property with a man named Les Wexner.
Mm-hmm.
Les Wexner is the owner of Victoria's
Secret.
Okay. He has a foundation. The name of it's escaping me right now. He has a foundation that was also giving money for experiments, but his experiments were in regards to surveillance. Surveillance, and that came along with the evolution of smartphones and how we now basically personally hand over all of our information and GPS tracking through smartphones. But his foundation strictly dealt with years ago. When you think about how long Victoria's Secret has been along and how long they've been together, and this has been going on. So he was part of basically developing the I Spy on Myself and Give You All the Information So You Can Find Me program. While Ghislaine Maxwell, which is, I believe, either employee 1 or 2 or 3 with this indictment, she has her foundation, which has already been traced to the Clinton Foundation, gave a lot of funding for hers. Hers is about protecting oceans, and the spokesperson for her company was Leonardo DiCaprio.
And just going back to those smartphones, you know, if you look at what, I mean, I work with adolescents all day. What do they use? They use Snapchat and they use Instagram. They don't even, it doesn't even involve words anymore. We've gone back to hieroglyphics and cave drawings. And they're right. They've cut out communications even down to the point where they're just sending pictures to one another, and they're barely even typing, let alone speaking to one another. They're isolating them from each other. What do abusers do? They isolate people. They break down communications, and that's what they're doing to these kids. And you know, it's yeah, look, we have to look at the roots of where this all came from. And Common Core, most especially, is rooted in a document called Education for Sustainable Development.
Right.
And in that document, they said that this is, of course, UN driven, that rich people are very, very wasteful because they have lots of money and they can just throw crap out, so they're wasteful. They don't have a lot of children because they're so smart, they know enough not to have a lot of children. Poor people, on the other hand, are baby-making machines. And they're wasteful in the fact that they just consume more because they make more babies because they're just so stupid, they're just stupid baby-making machines. Right. So the goal of this document and the goal of this UN agenda was to make people just wealthy enough so they're not stupid baby-making machines, but not rich enough so that they're wasteful, rich people. And that's the middle, Common Core. And that's your cubicle workers, that's your people who make just enough to get by, but not so much that they can get ahead.
Just enough to not question anything.
Exactly. That's right. And they all of, I have never seen, I've been doing this in 1995, I've been working with adolescents. I have never seen such compliant children in my entire life. Do you see the same thing, Kathy?
Absolutely.
They're just ridiculously compliant. They don't challenge authority.
They're completely rebellious, and they won't follow any rule.
And those kids get their heads chopped off. They're like, we're done with you. You're in the prison pipeline.
Right.
School to prison pipeline.
Right.
Which is a whole nother show.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Oh. So what other interesting pieces did you find? I mean, I found the whole education thing just so compelling once you start to realize how long.
Okay, now let's back this up. What countries are the targets of it? We know the United States. But I mean, if you've got underdeveloped or third world countries, those people are not going to be affected by this kind of stuff, correct?
No, we
Not
give them our
the-
mercury.
Right. We're giving them vaccines and everything, so they won't be overpopulated anymore. It's being done. Very similar things in England and in France and Italy.
Singapore.
Singapore is a big one.
Yeah.
China has their own version of it, but they're already
drones.
4 years down the road from where we are. 40 years down the road.
Singapore and Finland are actually like the models for it.
Right.
They're kind of like the epicenters in some ways.
Finland keeps coming up with the best scores in the world. And everybody keeps looking at Finland going, how come you have all these really wonderful things? And they send all these teachers over and they look and they go, they let the kids play until they were 9 years old. Right. They let them play outside and cut down trees and build things. And they don't teach them to read until they're 8.
Do you know how many phone calls I'll get? I let my children go on their bike. How unheard of. I have free range children. But parents will actually send me messages that they've seen my child. Did I know? Is everything okay? Should we stop and get them? Like, it's unusual to see children out there playing. Mm-hmm. These kids are kept at home. They're not allowed any freedom. Yeah. They're not allowed to experience anything. They're teaching classes now on how to adult because they can't do laundry.
Well, it's the number one problem I have is kids coming in, usually like 10th, 11th, 12th, in early college, terrified of adulthood, absolutely paralyzed with fear because they're not prepared for adulthood.
Right. And they're convinced the world is going to end in 12 years. So
and yes. Oh my God, yes. Yes.
I was going through my Facebook memories today, and one of them said, these kids aren't going to sit around the house all day, no matter what. The 8, the 6, and the 3-year-old, and I'm laughing with the 3-year-old who's now 11. I'm like, I was so hard on you guys.
They are literally teaching them in earth science class that if they so much as throw out a plastic straw, they are bringing about the end of the world.
Yes.
They are literally traumatized by it.
Yep, and God forbid they see you do it. I mean, I feel guilty if I throw anything that's supposed to be recycled in the garbage in front of somebody.
Well, and that's the other thing that they've done really successfully is driven this wedge between children and parents.
Absolutely.
You get the children coming home and challenging the parents, not the teacher. Teacher says you're an idiot. Teacher says you're wasteful. Teacher says you're littering. And you turn around and you say, no. I use this example with social emotional learning because you can't argue. How do you go to a legislator and say, I don't want the schools teaching my kid to be a good citizen? You can't fight this crap.
Right.
So, but I use the example. I'm a parent. I want my child to be the kind of kid who walks a little old lady across the street if he sees her, you know? And the school tells the kid, no, you can't do that because you're not allowed to talk to strangers. The kid comes home to the parent and says, Mom, no, teacher says no, I'm not allowed to do that. He doesn't go to the teacher and say, my parents said no.
Right.
It's the other way around. My teacher says you're out of your mind letting me talk to strangers.
Well, and then it sounds like the safety net, which has always been the churches, are now out of the picture. So any of that has been, other than the people that are raised at home that are doing homeschooled, then you've got, we just had a guy here. He's a priest. He's been raping children for 12 years. And we're waiting. He got convicted of all 13 or 14 charges. And now we're waiting sentencing. And people are in the courtroom. I mean, it just gets me crazy. People are in the courtroom going, but he's such a nice man. Can't you cut him a break?
Oh my God.
I mean, we're watching this tonight. Of course, I'm on the border, so the mentality of being on the border is quite a bit different because you have such a mix of people who have no idea what America is all about, that are crossing at random, who are hiding. And when I get online and I'm blogging, there's such an anger for this latest thing that Barr just put out that says asylum is going to have some rules. And it's going to take the heat off of these throngs of people that make artificial cases and do trafficking of children to get in.
But
Right.
that's what's been funding the entire operation of everything that we've been talking
Exactly.
about.
It's
That
all
right.
the
the
trafficking.
trafficked children was creating the ability to blackmail politicians to get them to do what they wanted, which is not do immigration reform since Reagan. They've
Right.
good because they got blackmail on all these people.
That's
And
right.
then it goes back to the organ harvesting when they're done. Yes, they do that. And then you got the really sick elite ones that are having the rituals where they're hopping around with the baby skulls and
Right.
all that stuff. It's
You know, there's even been rumors that there's cannibalism of small
Mhm.
children,
Yes.
and
You
nobody
know,
wants
how
nobody
many
wants to
kidneys?
talk about that.
How many kidney transplants did David Rockefeller have?
Yeah, they call it spirit cooking.
Yes.
well, they do
Spirit
call it
cooking.
spirit, but it derives from the occultism, which
Absolutely.
comes back from the days before pre-Christ. So
Mhm.
it's not something that's a new concept. It's just something that kind of went underground.
And that's where CNN gets invested because of Anderson Cooper and Gloria Vanderbilt.
Right.
Most people can't even begin to understand that. I can't wait for that to come out.
That was crazy. And
Start-
Emma, you mentioned the division with the church. You know, in the early 70s, or maybe it was like the mid 70s, and that's when Gen Xers were just really coming into the middle schools. That's when they started with the soccer on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, all day
Right.
soccer, and lacrosse on Sundays, and
Right.
Father's Day and Mother's Day and religious holidays,
Didn't
and
matter.
and they started to pull people out of the churches. We
Well,
never
and
had that when I was a kid.
but I understood that when they had the takeover of Germany, they did that same thing. They made children stay in school
That's right.
through what would normally be family time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You cut out the dinner table, you cut out the weekends, the churches,
Right.
and that they actually took down pictures that were religious from anywhere that might have been in any of the normal locations that you would see it.
But that's also why there was a big push for the universal pre-K, because the sooner we get them under the state
Yes.
care, the quicker
Right.
we can start to
Right.
impact their development.
Right.
That's why, like, New York is what they call a P to 20 state, preschool to age 20. They
You know,
want them.
I feel so bad for y'all in New York. My jaw drops every time I hear the latest thing. So
I don't
people,
want you to, because if we weren't here fighting and pushing back, it would be much worse.
well, I know
Absolutely.
there's going to be hope. I understand that there's a rumor that if we're, it looks like Trump Jr. might run.
Yeah.
I want Donald to run. I want him to run in 2026, which is the next run up. I finish the presidency, come back here, fix this.
New York. Yeah.
And then run for governor.
Right.
There you
And then you're so there. I mean, we can.
I'm telling you, you've got Florida who's starting to turn around,
Yep.
except for West Palm Beach, because that's right there with Debbie Wasserman Schultz
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
gizmos that are going on.
Yeah.
That nut hasn't begun to crack. Okay. Really, you're going to find that's going to be pretty scary. Then you've got New York, then you got California, and you got all that pedo stuff that's going on in California,
Yeah.
and that has crept its way up the west, the coast. I can understand why truly engaged Christian conservative people, just your mom and pop people, are terrified that the country was being lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was what my question was: is okay, you've got a generation of children that are now brainwashed, and they're in this template. There has to be some antidote for that.
Truth.
Unfortunately, the children are most malleable when they're children.
Right.
Those brain pathways that open start to shut down in adolescence. If those pathways aren't open, those learning pathways, you can't teach them. It's just like I'll never learn how to read music because I just never learned how to read music. That pathway is
Right.
not open in my brain, and so to brainwash them out of it is a monumental, beyond monumental task, because their brains aren't porous anymore. Once they reach like late adolescence, their brains are no longer porous.
And then what you've got is that generation that are going to start having children.
Yes.
Right.
And that
Well, no,
No,
they're not.
Yeah, they're not that
No.
generation. They don't want to have babies because the world's going to end. right?
Or because they don't want to have to do all the crap that their helicopter parents do for them.
Right. But
Right.
then you also have the abortion generation that believes we're overpopulating the world and shouldn't. So you're going to see other demographics start to rise.
They're
Or
all so
or
they're
the
they're
sex
never gonna
change
get
generation,
right.
right?
People like you and I, all you guys, we're going to have to live long enough till whatever comes up with a generation that's going to be survivors.
Right. The
to
only, we're going to have to rescue some and
and
you know,
utilize the others. Yeah.
yeah,
Give them jobs that they can become successful in
yep,
their little safe spaces. I
What
don't know.
I do from my end is I just encourage divergence. I really try to foster divergence with my client base and their parents.
right.
And it's not easy.
Mm.
I just
Going
keep jumping in the mud with them and just speaking the truth, knowing that there's a lot more watching than that are posting, and it's all we can do.
Yeah.
Well, it could very well be this whole Epstein Hollywood
Yeah.
connection, along with child trafficking, is going to become the unifying element for America.
And I'm going to tell you why, because right now they're only paying attention to this, thinking now that the Mueller report is over, this is the newest thing that's going to get Trump. And as long as they have that little beacon of hope that believes that, they're going to scour and hold on every single detail. And along the way, they're going to start to learn some things.
Well, what they haven't learned is every time they run up at him, it's like they shatter into 1,000 pieces.
Oh, that's like delicious. I love it when they do that. In other words, they're all going, "Oh my gosh, Mueller's going to get out there on the 17th," and now suddenly, well, I don't know, it's been postponed.
24th, yeah.
24th, yeah.
Right, and so we're having the buildup. Well, we've got these questions we want to ask him, and we're letting all this, stew into this pot of what he will say, and they're delivering hypothetical news, things that haven't even happened or were likely never going to happen, to try to get their viewership pumped up.
Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were BFFs because in 1992, 10 years before he even bought the island, he had a private screening with 28 girls, which turned out to be a Victoria's Secret screening. Let's connect some dots to the guy that I own the building with, right?
Well, doesn't that go back to what you were discussing with Common Core and how they're all starting at the bottom without any value system, without any pre-knowledge, right? So they get prompted by an emotional story, and they're off to the races.
Right.
Oh God, like I still hear the story about how Trump impersonated a disabled person.
Oh yeah.
And I still have you seen the entire video?
He did this to Ted Cruz also.
Well, and the reason I brought this up, what is the cure? What I've done, since we were going to discuss this and you were going to engage Kathy, and I knew that Mary would pull through, was I started, instead of trying to be explanatory and patient, I've come out with my comments. You probably have noticed some of my comments. I've come out with a little bit more of a beatdown, almost a slap.
Yeah.
And what I'm finding out is these people can't cope with that. And instead of being able to come back with wit and understanding, they run, which is better. I'd rather have them running and focus on those people we can help and educate, who are willing to be tutored or have a good debate, than these people that are nothing more than push button, orange man bad. Push button.
Emma, there's nothing like a good throat punch. There's really nothing like it.
I was like, I must have told people that the help desk, the helpline for TDS was open. I must have used that like 50 times during this experiment. And you would see the people who were just strictly pretending to be adversarial, maybe paid trolls or whatever.
You just gave me a brilliant idea. We should just get an 800 number and start a TDS hotline. How much fun would that be?
All you have to do is say, "You got him now." Just
really, and I use I format. Well, it's going to be 6 years to go, and by then you're going to need a straitjacket. Have you tried your sizing? They come in a variety of sizes. You need to check that out.
I think like a recorded, I'm writing it down. We could get a Google Voice number. I'm
Right.
not kidding. We'll get a Google Voice number and we'll do a recorded message. You have reached the TDS hotline. You know?
We're here to help you through your crisis.
We want you to know that even though Mueller didn't pan out, you need to pay close attention to Epstein because this is the key, guys.
Just
You
remember,
I
Orange
think we
Man
should lead him down the road. Orange Man bad.
I don't know if anybody saw this today, but they did this fancy thing with Nancy Pants Pelosi, trying to get into the record her utterances. Yeah, and then they followed it up with the guy who looks like he would be on the insurance commercial that got up on the wrong side of the rock from Texas. They got him to introduce more impeachment, right? And then you hear this impeach. And I'm sitting here going, all right, well, we've been through here. This is a hot frying pan, and you're trying to pick it up. You're trying to pick it up with without a pot holder.
Yeah.
And I can't wait because they're going to cream them if they don't get arrested before then. I think when we get to the OIG, and then we get to D class.
Yeah.
This is what you're going to see, and I'm going to put this out there. I want to tell you,
We're going to have 20,000 pages.
yeah, this is okay. And I'm not prognosticating. I don't have any ESP, but I want to say that it's my opinion that before the 2020 elections, you're going to see people drop out, and it's going to necessitate governors assigning people to those seats. And it's going to give a new encumbrance. What do they call that? The guy who's already in seat. They're going to manipulate that so that they're going to take back the House before the 2020 election, and that's the only way they can get the loopholes taken care of. You know, I'm sure that POTUS has got some other tricks up his sleeve.
People don't realize that. I mean, look at the coverage we did on NXIVM, right?
Right.
We know there's a Schumer file.
Yes, there is.
We know that there was a file on Spitzer. And that's probably why he stepped down.
Oh, and then we found out with Spitzer's
federal judges too. Like,
and that Spitzer's involved in, was it Betta or Buttigieg's candidacy?
Yeah, there you go. His campaign manager went over to Buttigieg. We're sitting, and when I tell people, we've been told.
Look at Kathy's face. She's like, what?
We've been told that look for the future very quickly that Jesse Smollett's going to get indicted federally.
Yeah.
And that goes back to Camilla, who took money from Epstein.
And they're claiming that's his auntie. Isn't that Auntie Camilla?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so we got Auntie Camilla, and she's going to run for president.
Oh, she's the top runner right now.
Have we been able to verify that relationship?
Well, we understand that Smollett's mother was her sister.
Right. Okay.
Or sister-in-law.
I mean, it's tough because we can't get birth certificates.
Imagine that.
I know.
But you know what? I got to tell you, in New York, my dog can't get her nails trimmed unless she shows all her documentation. So, whatever.
You have more documentation on dogs than you do on people that are circling illegals. And you here on the border, if you say an illegal, you say it's an illegal alien, which is the correct legal term, has been for a couple hundred years, and they go crazy. Nobody's illegal. And then they talk about the American Indians. And I'm like, let's go back to Adam and Eve. Those were the originators. I said, but it's pretty pathetic if you got to go back 300 years to make your case that we're all immigrants. Because frankly, if you're American citizen by virtue of birth or by naturalization, that's the delimiter. That's the delimiter.
No, we're racist.
Right.
The country as a whole is racist because we're nothing but white. We've never evolved into a melting pot of anything.
There's no such thing as white. We're all putty colored. Some of it's
crazy. I know. I'm like, we want 2 million immigrants here.
Once the Roman Empire fell, there were so many hordes of the Franks and the different people in Europe. They overran. Uh-oh. With they they overran Italy, and you have such a you can't find a Roman.
Right.
Find a Roman today. Well, the Romans, where are they? You try to find someone who is in England, who I mean, they have so many.
Yeah, the only Romans now are the Roman Catholics.
Oh no, that's different. You
I'm
wait.
basking here in my putty color privilege.
Well, what's very interesting is going to be when it comes out that Epstein is connected to the Pope.
Yes. No, and there's pictures of him, but we'll get into that. I'm sure we'll be back with this one.
Yeah, we're gonna have to.
We're
We're gonna be revisiting this subject.
Just getting this party started, right? I mean,
yeah, and we're gonna go ahead and wrap up the Nixon one too, right before we get to the other stuff. So we're gonna have plenty to cover on this. I'm glad we are, because mainstream media is definitely ignoring these pieces of it.
Absolutely.
Poor Kathy, we hope you don't look like the deer in the headlights. We go off on all these tangents. I mean, you look at what's being done on the stupid shows like The View.
Oh, I know.
And we start talking about real stuff. We're prying open. Yeah. We're prying open the canned goods with our teeth.
Yeah.
Still women, still opinions.
Okay, Jenny. Why?
Because I
bring it down. Go ahead.
I love coming here with you guys, and we hope that we are going to be here next week. So we're going to see you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.
Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Okay.
We hope everyone enjoyed tonight's Coast to Coast. Have a good evening, everybody.
You too.
Bye-bye.